The jungle was never quiet. Not since the day she left. Every rustle, every cry, every distant echo reminded him of her. For years, the gorilla she raised as a baby waited, staring toward the forest edge, as if the wind itself might bring her back. And when she finally did return, scientists, guards, even her own family begged her not to go. They said he'd forgotten her. They said he'd become wild, dangerous, unpredictable, but she didn't believe them, because love doesn't disappear in the wild, it only hides. And when their eyes met again, what happened next silenced the entire jungle. She found him in the rain, a trembling shadow beneath a fallen tree. His tiny hand clutched a broken branch, as if it were his mother. The forest had taken everything from him, except the will to live. She wrapped him in her jacket. Pressing him close to her chest, he stopped crying. From that moment, two hearts, one human, one wild, began to beat as one. She named him Kaibo, meaning hope. Nights became lullabies under the stars. Days turned into lessons, teaching him to climb, to trust, to smile. He learned her face like the sunrise, her scent like safety. And when she laughed, he'd beat his chest in joy. They weren't from the same world, but love built a bridge, a bond so pure it could silence fear itself. Even the other researchers whispered, "They understand each other." And maybe they did, because every time she looked into his eyes, she saw something familiar. A soul that remembered kindness, a heart that mirrored hers. But the world outside their jungle had other plans. And soon, that bond would be tested in ways no one could imagine. The order came suddenly, a call from the authorities. Cold, final, Kibo must be relocated, she froze. The papers trembling in her hands, they said it was for safety, but deep down, she knew the truth. They were afraid of what they didn't understand, that a gorilla could love, that a human could be family. She fought, she begged, she cried, but rules don't bend for emotions. The morning they came, Kibo clung to her legs, refusing to let go. His eyes filled with panic, confusion, heartbreak. She whispered, "I'll come back for you." He touched her face gently, then roared, a sound that shook every heart. The gate closed between them. The jungle swallowed his cries. And for the first time in years, she felt empty. Days turned to weeks, weeks into years, and every night she dreamed of those eyes, the ones that once called her mother. But when the letter came years later, warning her not to return, she knew she had to. They said Kaibo had changed, that he was no longer the gentle soul she remembered, that time and loneliness had hardened him into something dangerous, but love doesn't fear scars. She arrived at the reserve, clutching the same jacket she'd once wrapped him in. The rangers looked uneasy. "Mum, if you step in there, we can't guarantee your safety," she nodded. "He's still my boy." They opened the gate, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Every sound vanished, replaced by the thumping of her heart. There he was, massive, silent, eyes darker than she remembered, but still familiar. He didn't move, didn't roar, just stared. Every instinct told her to step back, but instead she whispered his name, Kibo, for a moment, nothing. Then his chest rose, a soft rumble escaping his throat. Recognition, the first spark of something that never truly died. He began to move. Slowly, each step heavier than the last. The guards shouted,
readying their rifles. "Don't move!"
they warned. But she didn't. Her eyes filled with tears. Her hands trembled, yet she stayed. Kibo stopped just feet away. The world around them faded. All that existed was memory. She reached out her hand. He tilted his head. A sound left his chest. Deep, trembling, broken, not a growl, a cry, and then he reached out too. His massive hand brushed against hers. Tears spilled down her cheeks. The guards lowered their guns, silent. In that single touch, years of pain melted away. The wild and the human reunited. In pure,
wordless forgiveness. What happened next?
No one expected. Kibo stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, gently, as if afraid she might vanish. She buried her face into his fur, whispering, "I missed you."
"My boy," he pressed his forehead against hers. The cameras
clicked. Even the rangers wept. The world had warned her not to return. They said he'd forgotten, but love doesn't forget, not when it's real. For minutes, they stood there, heart to heart, his massive frame trembling like a child, her tears wetting his shoulder. The jungle was silent,
watching. In that silence, something sacred was born again. Not science, not instinct, just love. Raw, infinite, undying, and in that moment,
the wild remembered what kindness felt like. She whispered his name again, softer this time. Kibo. His arms tightened gently, the way a child clings before sleep. Every breath between them carried memories untold. She could feel his heartbeat racing.
Matching hers, it wasn't fear. It was recognition. The kind that only a soul can carry across years. Birds began to sing again.
Shyly at first, as if blessing the reunion. Even the wind seemed to still, giving space for their silence. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they weren't of pain. They were the tears of something lost, finally found again. Kibo closed his eyes. His breath deep and calm in that quiet embrace. The jungle had witnessed something divine. It wasn't a moment of discovery. It was a return. The return of trust. The return of love, and somewhere deep in the canopy above, the sun broke through, casting a golden light over them both. A light that whispered, "Love never forgets its way home." The scientists couldn't believe their eyes, extended, every lens focused on the impossible. They had come expecting chaos, but witnessed calm. Every hypothesis fell apart in silence. Even the animals nearby seemed to pause, sensing something divine. One researcher whispered, "He's not attacking, he's remembering." Another wiped her eyes and said, "This is love in its purest form." Kibo wasn't just reacting, he was recognizing. The warmth of her skin, the scent of her presence, all etched in memory. Years apart, yet his heart never forgot its first home. Every motion was filled with care, not power,
not dominance. He touched her face like a fragile treasure from a lost world. Her eyes met his,
and science melted into something sacred, not a study, a reunion of souls. The camera trembled in the scientist's hands. No one spoke.
No one dared interrupt the miracle unfolding, because in that jungle clearing, they weren't watching a gorilla and a human. They were watching forgiveness itself take shape. It wasn't about training.
It wasn't about instinct. It was about faith, the kind that only love can teach. Even the air changed, softer, warmer, like the earth itself exhaled relief. Kibo's hand brushed away her tear,
and gasps echoed around, a gesture so human.
It broke every wall between their worlds. In that single motion, centuries of fear crumbled. For the first time, the scientists didn't see a test subject. They saw a miracle. They saw truth in motion. Because what they were witnessing wasn't evolution. It was the rebirth of empathy. And in the quiet hum of the forest, science bowed to love. The moment his arms closed around her, time shattered. Her mind spiraled back to the days of innocence, a little gorilla clinging to her chest, heartbeat to heartbeat. She remembered the way he'd follow her footsteps,
mimicking her every move. The mornings filled with laughter and sunlight through leaves. The first time he called out, not a growl,
but a cry that sounded like Ma. Tears blurred her vision as the years collapsed into seconds. She saw his baby eyes again, full of wonder, full of trust. Every scar on her hands told a story of love that refused to fade. She remembered how he'd run to her after every fall,
arms wide, and how she'd whisper, "You're safe now,
my little one." She felt that same warmth now.
Even in his massive embrace, he made a deep rumble,
the same sound he made when he was comforted, the sound of belonging. She choked out,
"I missed you so much." His response was silence, but it said everything. No resentment, no confusion.
Only homecoming. She realized he had never hated her for leaving. He had only waited. Waited for the day her scent would return to the wind. And now that she was here, the waiting ended. The years apart melted into forgiveness. Her tears soaked his fur like rain falling on dry earth. He held her tighter, afraid she might disappear again. The jungle faded. Only memory remained. Because love like theirs doesn't die in absence. It simply hides, waiting for the heart to remember its way back home. And when it does, even the wild bows in silence, the world didn't just watch, it felt. Strangers who had never met cried together online. News anchors choked on their words mid-broadcast. Parents showed their children, whispering, "See, love has no species." In hospitals, patients smiled for the first time in weeks. In classrooms, children clapped when Kibo hugged her. Old men in parks wiped away tears they didn't expect. One soldier wrote, "I saw courage today, not in war,
but in love." The video became more than a story. It
became a mirror, showing what humanity had forgotten. Government spoke of it in meetings, churches, played it during sermons. Even those who didn't believe in miracles began to wonder, how could a creature the world called savage love so purely? It wasn't training, it wasn't instinct, it was memory. Born of care, every comment, every message echoed one truth: love is the language every soul understands. And in that language, Kibo spoke louder than any human could. He didn't need words, just eyes that remembered kindness, eyes that changed.
Millions eyes that reminded us that the wild isn't cruel.
We just stopped listening. And as the video spread, the world didn't just see a gorilla and a woman, it saw itself. Fragile.
Lost, yearning to feel something real again. The forest was quiet.
Almost respectful. She could feel every heartbeat echoing in her chest. Her hands shook as she touched his fur one last time. He blinked slowly, calm.
Knowing, no anger, no confusion, just peace. She smiled through her tears.
"You're brave now, my boy." He reached for her necklace, the one he used to tug as a baby. She let him hold it. Then he placed it gently on her shoulder.
As if returning a gift, it was his way of saying,
You taught me everything. The guards lowered their eyes.
unable to watch the farewell for a moment.
The jungle stood still. No bird dared to sing. She turned away, every step heavier than the last. Kabo watched her silhouette fade through the trees. He didn't chase. He didn't cry. He just raised his head toward the sky and let out a deep sound, a sound not of pain, but of gratitude. A thank you to the woman who gave him a soul. And as she disappeared into the mist, a single petal from that flower drifted to the ground. It landed at his feet. He picked it up and held it to his chest. Because even in goodbye, love had found a way to stay. Decades later, children still learned his name, Kibo, the gorilla who loved. Documentaries, books, even paintings told their story. But none captured the warmth of that moment, that silent embrace. At the sanctuary, new caretakers whispered his tale to frightened animals, and somehow they calmed down faster, as if his spirit still lingered, reminding them it was safe to trust. Researchers changed forever. They started naming their subjects instead of
Numbering them, they treated every creature as a being.
not a project. Love became part of science. Empathy became data, and slowly the world healed a little. Some nights, under the same stars that once watched them, she'd visit the plaque. She'd sit by the old tree and talk softly.
As if he could still hear, the wind would rustle through the leaves, gentle, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, and she'd smile. You never left, did you?
'Cause love doesn't die. It transforms. It becomes a whisper in the trees, a shimmer in moonlight, a lesson in every child's storybook. The jungle still remembers them, and every animal that's ever known, kindness carries a piece of Kibo's soul. Because once upon a time, a woman taught the world that even the wild can love, and that lesson changed everything. Everything.